Welcome back. This is our last but not the least session. Thank you for everyone staying till the last session. And in the last session, we have two speakers. First speaker, Tom Morton, is a senior HPC AI accountant executive for Nortech. For more than 20 years, Tom have worked with universities throughout the country to provide computer clusters for HPC and AI. Founded in 1999, Nortech is located in Burnsville, Minnesota. Nortech's very first cluster was supplied to University of Minnesota in early 2000s. As an NVIDIA preferred partner, Nortech supplies GPU nodes, GPU workstations, and turnkey clusters to organizations worldwide. And his talk is Minnesota-based provider for HPC AI solution. Our second speaker, Aaron Anderson, is MedTech sales leader for North America, Latin America, and has over 5 years of experience focused on healthcare and life sciences space within NVIDIA. Aaron has engaged ranging from startups to global enterprise, working on AI initiatives. The exposure provides a depth of experience and perspective, providing a unique industry perspective where companies can invest time and resources to achieve accelerated outcome. And his talk today is NVIDIA's 3 computer strategy for MedTech. Let's welcome Tom for the first.
Thank you for that great introduction. I feel like I'm not going to have to even talk anymore because he went through everything. No, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, as mentioned, we're celebrating our 25th year anniversary now, based down in Burnsville, Minnesota, and we've been serving, research, government, Fortune 500, and educational firms for that time. This is our facility here. Our customers tell us that they like working with us because it's one number to call, and basically we got production, engineering, sales, everything all under one roof, and so the person that you're working with built your cluster is going to be able to support you the best way. We don't use any third-party engineers or anything. These are some of the recognitions that Nortech has received over the years. We were listed on CRN's top 40 data center infrastructure providers. We've been listed in HPC Wire as well. We work with some of the smartest people in the world. A few of these, like the LIGO Gravitational Wave Project and IceCube Neutrino Project, it gave Nortech the opportunity to work with such prestigious institutions like Caltech, University of Wisconsin, and LIGO actually won the Nobel Prize in Physics a few years back for proving Einstein's theory of relativity, and then the IceCube project allowed us to work with University of Wisconsin and others. These are some of our hardware and software partners. Of course, we work very closely with NVIDIA. We also work with Intel and AMD, and Nortech uses Supermicro as our main hardware platform. Nortech is also the main distributor for NICE DCV software, which is used for remote visualization. We have a couple different contracts that can be purchased. Minnesota State Computer Contract for here in Minnesota, and then we also have the University of Wisconsin system contract. If you're from another organization, a lot of times you can piggyback off of these contracts, and a lot of them have joint powers agreements. Some of the value-added services. So Nortech has a demo cluster, so if you want to test your code, no obligations. You can come in and test your specific code on specific NVIDIA GPUs. We also offer assistance with help with your grant submission, help with quotes for that, and again, we have the local Minnesota-based support. Everything is right here. Okay, this is my last slide. I thought this might be of interest, especially if anybody is in radiology. PT Yap is one of the directors for BRIC. It's a biomedical research imaging center. And one thing we learned about the radiologists is that they sure need a lot of compute power, and they also need a lot of storage. With saving MRIs, high-res MRIs takes up a lot of storage. But so they came to us about a year ago, and they needed new hardware. We set up their people with the Nortec demo cluster. They tested on the L40S. They realized that that was a perfect fit for what they need to do for the majority of their workloads. They had a few other workloads that needed more memory in the GPU and needed double precision. So then we set them up with some of the H100 and H200 servers. Workstations with RTX cards for pre-processing, and then again, the storage, many storage servers with hundreds of hard drives, many petabytes of storage. So yeah, with that, we'll turn it over to Aaron Anderson from NVIDIA.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be the last speaker of your, I think it was like 3 or 4 days, I think it was. But thank you for having us and giving us an opportunity to speak. I have a few slides, a few demos. We'll see if they all kind of come together here. But NVIDIA, as you guys know, is an AI company, accelerated computing company. We're one of the AI companies, one of the only ones on the planet that work with every other AI company, which allows us to learn and apply techniques and technologies from one domain to another, right? And healthcare is no different. Although we are an AI company, we are a platform company by which our customers, enterprises, research institutions can hopefully do their life's work within their lifetime. That's the goal. People think of NVIDIA as just a chip designer. Actually, they think we manufacture our own chips. We don't. We design chips. But these chips have no value if the user, the developer, can't develop easily on top of them, right? Which is why we have software. It's called CUDA, Computational Unified Device Architecture, that runs on all of our GPUs. At the bedside, in the edge device, and a radiology, a CT scanner, or an X-ray, which is kind of my world. Whether it runs in the cloud, the software is the same. So you program once and it runs everywhere, right? And then we also build domain-specific acceleration libraries. So for whatever clinical domain or domain that you're building an application in, you can take advantage of our open source software for you to develop your application. So don't think of NVIDIA as just a provider of GPUs, right? You can have a really fast GPU, but if you don't have a software to take advantage of those tensor cores of the hardware, then it kind of doesn't matter, right? So we spend a lot of our time focused on using the software to optimize the hardware, right? Now, when it comes to healthcare specifically, we have a lot of libraries and capabilities that we enable the developer community to use, anywhere from where a lot of things in diagnosis and healthcare starts with is in imaging, image reconstruction, whether it's MRI, CT, X-ray, HoloScan for real-time processing at the edge. You have an AI or a model and you want to deploy it in some fashion close to the patient. You can't just go to the cloud and come back in certain situations. Where there is medical imaging, we have this open source project called Monai to make annotating medical images easier, or annotating surgical video easier. We have platforms for drug discovery and generative AI and the generating novel therapies or novel drugs. We have Parabricks that accelerates secondary and tertiary analysis for genomics. And these are all things that we invest in to make it easier for folks to build applications on top of NVIDIA, and again, do your life's work in your lifetime, right? Our healthcare group is broken up into kind of 3 segments: medical devices, med tech, which is kind of, and genomic sequencers, which also inclusive of surgical robotics. That's med tech. That there's digital health, which you think of payers and providers, research institutions, some of the EHRs of the world, and then we also have digital biology, which is tech bios, large pharma that are building drugs in silico. And AI is a little crazy, right? It is infiltrating our life. Some of it can be kind of challenging. Some of it could be very effective and beneficial. Healthcare is probably one of those ones that have the most opportunity. If you think of an aging population and the ability to take care of folks as they get older, we don't have enough healthcare workers. There's also this thing called clinical burnout, right? Where the physicians are just tired, right? So how do we support a physician as they take care of patients? But it started off in perception, right? So medical imaging, speech recognition, perception AI. Now we're using AI to generate new content, right? New videos, new pictures, et cetera. Agentic AI, where you can actually have agents do things on your behalf, right? Agentic AI. And now we're in this world of physical AI, where you're applying AI in a true sense of autonomous robots, right? Either it's a healthcare robot taking care of folks that are, at home care versus being in a nursing facility. You think of better surgical procedures and precision, better outcomes, and a robot, say like a Da Vinci, and this idea of physical AI, of AI in an autonomous machines, like we're going to see this more often, and hopefully we're ready for it. And we're essentially building on top of foundational technologies, right? So you think of what I had mentioned before, image reconstruction, developing on CUDA to software-defined medical devices, and the fact that medical devices in and of themselves are typically build once, don't touch it. But in our everyday lives, where we see and we're going to get access to these agents, these technologies that make our lives a little bit more efficient, a little bit easier, et cetera, and we're probably going to want to see those same things trickle down into our healthcare. And software-defined approach is kind of that ability to accelerate the innovation of being able to develop and deploy applications at a quicker pace than we've been able to traditionally. And you also think of offering co-pilots or agents to support either surgeons in the middle of surgery, or allowing or enabling physicians to even do something as simple as a report. You think of how many patients physicians see. Every time they see a patient, touch a patient, they have to generate a report, and it's very burdensome. They actually spend probably half their time in front of a computer doing reports. Or even if you were in front of a doctor, they're just doing a scribe thing here, just looking at you kind of half of the time, right? So what if you can free up a physician of engaging the patient while at the same time reducing the administrative overhead of doing clinical notes, which is a big deal. And then obviously, like I just talked about, autonomous devices or certain parts of the procedure that can be done. Not just here's a robot, do the procedure, and there's no kind of human in the loop. There's definitely a human in the loop, but how do we make it more easier? How do we expand the access to care? How do we ensure quality of the procedure no matter where you are? You don't have to go to a major city to get to the best surgeon. You may be able to stay where you are and have AI augment surgeons or caretakers in rural cities, for example. And I kind of mentioned this before, we're a platform company, and we kind of think of med tech, we think of autonomous vehicles, manufacturing, and this kind of three-computer strategy. You have the supercomputers, which I think even Jim maybe even talked about this, of training the models. That is kind of the AI factor. You're training the model. You're eventually going to deploy it, real runtime, at the edge, potentially. It might not be at the edge. In my world, it's the edge sometimes in med tech. And then there's also this idea of simulation, right? If you think of a self-driving car, for example, there's not enough millions of miles that a car can drive to collect every single data point of what can happen while you're driving, right? a ball falls into the street, a kid runs into the street. Like how long do you have to drive to generate that much data to then train a model, right? Which is a lot of what ends up happening is we create these virtual environments to generate the synthetic data, to generate the corner cases, to train the model, right? So there's this idea, simulation or synthetic data generation to train a model. And NVIDIA, a 30-year-old company, the past 2 decades in the advent of CUDA has kind of led us to this moment. You're enabling new use cases with new capabilities, both hardware and software innovation. NVIDIA being and investing in a full stack computing solution, it enables us to approach a 3-computer approach to some of these challenges. Will I say that the 3-computer architecture and simulation is 100% there for every use case that's out there? Probably not, but we're on track to, as technology improves, simulation and the fidelity of the types of images or videos that we can generate to train a model it will eventually happen, right? If you think of simulation of outside of the body in the OR, everything's very rigid, everything is pretty standard, a chair, a desk, those types of things, versus like deformable tissue like your liver or like blood flow. And the ability to create synthetic data out of that, a little bit tougher, right? So it'll be kind of on its way. So it really just depends on what you're trying to simulate. Now, when it comes to edge real runtime, we have a platform called HoloScan, which allows, it's a real runtime software engine to accelerate certain modalities from ultrasound, image-guided therapy, robotics, diagnostics. BCI is a big thing, right? Brain-computer interface. We had a demo at GTC where we had HoloScan hooked up to BCI, right? For being able to text or turn on lights, et cetera, and care for someone who can't take care of themselves, right? And this is a real runtime performance kind of at the edge, the deployment of AI inference. And then, it can run anywhere. It can run, in a box at the edge, or it can run in the cloud, right? And we're focused on building capabilities for developers to be able to bring in their best ideas, their thoughts, whatever they can dream up and build on top of NVIDIA. And then also, especially on the med tech side of things, there's a lot of time spent, I wouldn't necessarily say wasted, but I could say wasted, spending time on building things net new that are already built for people to just take and go. Right? Don't spend time building a software stack when we have essentially what you need to develop faster, right? This is one demo here where you can think of, I don't know if this one has video or not, but essentially it's a co-pilot for a surgeon using the Moon surgical device. You'll see, I don't think this one has audio, but you'll see the prompt and kind of a surgeon and or support staff being able to interact with the robot, just demonstrating sort of capabilities. So it's asking essentially how they're running the system and what the output of that is, and generating pictures. Usually there'll be like a manual sitting there. Either they have to thumb through a paper manual, which isn't pretty ideal when you're scrubbed in, probably not ideal, or there'll be someone in the room telling you how to use, and again, these are basic sort of tasks here, but you can imagine using this as like a surgical co-pilot, and maybe even not even typing, obviously, but like audio, like just speaking to the robot and it doing these things. And again, we're talking about operational efficiency for the hospital, potentially a better experience for the physician. Here, let me go to the next one, right? And then there's the computer. The second computer is the AI factory. Data coming in, intelligence coming out. You think of that, right? And I think you have a cluster here where you have researchers have access to, do the research, whether it's like quantum chemistry or, computational biology or what have you. So you have a concept of that here. But you think of across many enterprises, they don't necessarily have themselves organized to support an AI factory, where you're doing iterative prototyping, building foundation models. Again, new data coming in, you're training the model, updates go out to the edge, and kind of this loop. And NVIDIA helps customers like University of Minnesota or other enterprises on how to build and deploy these. And it's a way of supporting research and supporting sort of innovation. Nortec was mentioned some of the work that they're doing with customers. And some of this comes directly from NVIDIA, and some of it comes directly from our partners, but we really rely on partners to kind of pull it all together. We typically will have a reference architecture where we say, hey, this is how you would do it because this is how we would do it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to do everything that we do, but we try and have certified partners and technologies along the way that people can choose from, and customers or partners like Nortec put that together and deliver that to the customer. One other thing, no, there we go. Hold on a second. That's kind of blood and guts. Monai is a platform that we support. It's an open source project, mostly focused in medical imaging, but is expanding to like surgical video and multimodal data sets. You think of, in treating a patient, it's not any modality that you're relying on. You're relying on clinical notes, you're relying on DICOM images, video, voice, right? And how do you take all that data kind of aggregates into what your care track would be for the patient, right? So how do you use a surgical agent to kind of again make it easier and get understanding of the patient, of a particular procedure. And I kind of mentioned before, like clinical notes is a pretty big one, at least in the short term. You talk to many doctors. My wife's a physician at UCSF, and I say, oh yeah, AI this, AI that, and she'll say, AI is not taking my job. I'm like, AI is not taking your job. She's trying to make your life easier, but she has I forgot what the application's called. It's like a scribe, where she uses in front of patients, and it takes all the notes and the interaction, and it generates a clinical note that doesn't automatically submit to EHR, but Humi in the loop, she reviews it, hits send. That's a huge burden, time savings for her. It makes my life easier too. We'll go to this image. So you actually see here where you're taking a recording, but also you think of like a vision language model. Has anyone heard of a vision language model, right? Where you can see a scene and the model understands what phase of surgery am I in? Where's, segment this, segment, you're querying a data stream that it's just seen, right? And from there, you can do a lot of things like generate a surgery note, right? And these are the types of things like vision language models, multimodal models enable, developers to do some pretty interesting things to drive efficiency in a procedure in a hospital, et cetera. Not only reducing clinical burnout, but also, potentially providing better care. Right, so then they did, if you looked at it, this is a procedure summary, right? So you don't have to do it from scratch. So the third computer, physical AI, we have this platform called Omniverse, where you can bring in 3D assets. It's based off of USD, Universal Scene Description, created by Pixar, right? So you have all these different tools that you can bring into a simulated environment or a virtual environment. And these are some of the things we just announced at GTC, Isaac for healthcare, right? So Omniverse Isaac for simulation, in the generic sense, is good for most things, but we all know that healthcare has specific requirements. Different types of workflows, different types of areas of domain-specific areas. And Isaac for Healthcare is our platform to, it says, train robots to be robots. So kind of that example I gave you, an autonomous vehicle example, where we're generating data, we're creating virtual environments that obey the laws of physics to train a model, right? So instead of a robot having to go through every single scenario that a human can come across in their life, right? A lifetime of, even my life, trading a robot based off of my life couldn't come across all the different sort of variations of life, right? It had to live millions and millions and billions of lives, right? So this is a way of training robots, whether it's a surgical robot, whether it's a humanoid, you're training a robot in a simulated environment. And we're creating easier to follow pipelines for people to generate this synthetic data to train their model. And there's one kind of on the right, but this is one that we demonstrated at GTC, and this is kind of my last slide here, so this demo, I think, was created in like 2 or 3 weeks, right before GTC, somewhere in between there. And it's a robotic arm. It is obviously, so it's doing a robotic liver scan of like an ultrasound, essentially. It was all done, and this robot was all trained in a virtual environment. And if you think of ultrasound, right, it's not like a CT, MRI, X-ray where it's very controlled, where they, put you through the scanner. Ultrasound is very variable, right? So there are times where you're doing an ultrasound where the physician didn't see it or didn't get to the right area type of thing. And you could use AI to say if they've caught the right image or not, so you don't have to call the patient back. People don't like getting called back, right? I'm here already, do everything you need to do, I don't want to be called back. And AI and robotic, we're seeing a lot of autonomous X-rays, autonomous ultrasounds, et cetera, where these procedures will be automated. And it's not just because we don't have enough healthcare workers, but also because they want to ensure that the procedure or the scan is done correctly, right? And this is kind of the three-computer architecture. It's the developing of the AI, the generating synthetic data, and then the deployment of AI in whatever setting it's going to be. Again, in this case, it's like at the bedside, at the doctor, at the patient type of thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be in a self-driving car. It could be in a manufacturing facility. It could be a number of different areas where AI is actually deployed. And that's kind of how we think about, not just in healthcare, but in a lot of the segments that we go to market in. This is three-computer architecture. Guess there's any questions? That's all I got for you guys. Anything? Yeah? Thank you for the time. There's actual questions? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. For me or for Tom? It's for Tom, right?
You, actually.
Oh,
I
yeah,
know,
okay.
it's the end of the day, and I've
Yeah,
got questions.
yeah, for sure.
So you described at the beginning medical device approval by the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
You do all of your work, you get it approved by the FDA, and then you can't touch it.
Yeah, we
And
don't
so-
get it. So just for clarification, we work with medical device companies, but we don't do the regulation. FDA.
No.
Okay, just
But
making
like,
sure,
how
yeah.
do you, when you're working with medical device companies and they're asking these questions about AI,
Yeah.
how do you, how does the FDA treat any of these AI things that you have when AI, by its nature, it's continually training, you're continually refining it? So even
Yeah,
the
yeah.
example of that one at the end, like you build it, you get it approved, but then you're going to be learning more things. And so you're
Right.
going to want to update the software.
Yeah.
But then the FDA, like how does the FDA?
Yeah, there's still, you still have to go through, there's this thing called software as a medical device, where the medical device is software in and of itself. It has not tied to any hardware or anything like that. And there's already processes with the FDA about how to, they still have to go through. Now, when I say fast innovation, it's all relative, right? If it's, Gemini on a Google search, like just update that thing, right? Like no one, right? But if it's in a regulated space, there's still procedures and processes through the FDA that you have to go through and submit. Now, there are times where I think medical device companies and companies like NVIDIA can educate the FDA on how to accelerate that or what this actually means. But it isn't like no guardrails, just update it, go. But I do think over time there'll be a better understanding of AI, and instead of it being like maybe a 6 to 12 month process, that'll shorten over a period of time. But there's still guardrails on what you can deliver if it's touching a patient.
You are getting them approved.
We're not. No, we're not.
Not you, but like the vendors that you're working
Of
with
course,
are
yeah,
getting
of
them
course,
approved.
of
And
course.
so does the FDA call on you as the technical expert to help them
No.
understand the AI or?
No.
No.
No. We don't get involved in that. We kind of draw
I
a
see,
clear
so the
line
medical
of-
device companies, they take care of it.
Yeah, they take care of it. They're the ones that work directly with the FDA on a regular basis. We don't, right? So we will help them accelerate their innovation on our platforms, but then it's ultimately to them. I think you need like a QMS system. There's like a lot of requirements to even approach the FDA with a submission that NVIDIA will never get involved with. Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
right. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Being someone who has been following being a robotics major here at the U and following NVIDIA's work for the past couple of years, this is a question out in the blue.
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think we would have something for medical robotics, for surgical robotics, as we have for mimic gen or text mimic gen? Like, if we get a data generation methodology for surgical procedures, would that be falling under the data privacy, or would that fall under, like, who would own the data and how long do you think we are from the time?
It's interesting because I think historically folks haven't, or companies haven't seen value in the data. But there are arrangements and agreements that the medical device companies do have that allow them to get access to the data. But you have to have like a patient has to agree, the hospital has to agree, and that's like paperwork that we're seeing more often to try and get access to the data to improve the models. And I don't know what the arrangement is in terms of like what the incentive is for them to have those types of arrangements, but they do that now.
So it is not just about the collection of the data, but how reliable do you think the
What was that last part?
How reliable the data would be?
Label the data, you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How reliable?
Reliant.
Reliant, yeah. How
Okay.
reliant the data would be
Sure.
if we were to translate the mimic gen for generating surgical procedures or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think it's something that the industry is still kind of working through. I think it's access to data, access to reliable, like what's the ground truth, right? And at least the companies that we engage with are still kind of working through like the types of data that they need. Can they get access to the data, right? And sometimes there's companies that kind of start from scratch new who are thinking about these things already. And then there's some companies who have a lot of market presence that it's something that's new to them. So it's a new muscle that they're kind of looking to build, that they have to go back and kind of see what that looks like for their existing customer base type of thing. But those are, that's why synthetic data generation is pretty important. If it has the for that particular high fidelity for that particular use case. Because, you know, if you're in self-driving cars, you can just, it's not just this easy, but like you have cameras on top of cars collecting data and no one cares, you know? When you're talking about in how much data can you collect in that scenario versus like, hey, I want to take, you know, video of someone's chest cavity, right? Like there's not just amount of data that's out there, so there has to be something to kind of augment that data. Again, it has to have high fidelity enough for it to be something that is usable. But those are sort of the things that I think the industry itself is kind of working through, right? I don't believe today that there's any, you know, synthetic data any data generated synthetically that's being used for, like, I'm not aware of it, but I guess what I would say is that this is kind of where things are going. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point that's the case. Yeah.
And just one more question. I have been using cuBLAS and cuFFTs, and Isaac Sim since it was like 3.8.
Yeah.
And when are we getting soft muscle or soft object?
Deformable tissue type stuff? Yeah.
For tissue manipulation, because
Yeah.
it's good for rigid body manipulation and rigid body physics,
Yeah.
but soft body physics, that's something.
Of course, yeah. It's something that we come across. Usually we take the crawl, walk, run method, right? So ideally we would get to that point, but hopefully it's like, can we just like simulate an operating room at the moment, right? Like where it's not deformable tissue. Like those are things that I think will be on the table, not into the too distant future type of thing, but I don't think we're there yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the amazing
Yeah, no
presentation.
problem. You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question for Aaron and Tom. Is that we talked to a lot of partners with NVIDIA about for company, they want to house their own GPU for some AI modeling training or inferences. But usually, how is the balance between the like housing our own infrastructure? We will require a lot of high maintenance. While if we go to just cloud computing, that will be save a lot of management. But in the meantime, it's a high cost. So I was wondering how you think about which approach. How do you think we should make the decision?
I mean, for me, it's more of like understanding what your baseline utilization is, right? So like, you know, and you can kind of play that out of like, hey, what are the workloads? Like, what is the utilization and what are the workloads? And then you want to have kind of a on-prem infrastructure for kind of like your steady state. If like, you know, if you're thinking about a hybrid cloud, you can do one or the other, but if you're talking about a hybrid cloud environment where you have understanding your steady state of all your workloads and then using resources from the cloud when necessary. But there is a balance of, hey, once you own the infrastructure, you have to care and feed for it, right? But it depends on the type of workloads and applications you want to run. So that's the approach that we typically take. You know, are they bursty, where you don't need them running all the time? You just need to run a job every couple weeks. Do you need to run these continuously? If it's bursty, cloud might be better. If it's sustained compute resources, on-prem's better. But you also would need, to your point, kind of need to have the technical expertise and capabilities to kind of support that infrastructure once it's deployed. I don't know, Tom, do you? Yeah.
Yeah, so from a Nortec standpoint, we might be a little bit swayed because, you know, we're an on-prem company, but
Sure,
we do see a lot of cloud, and we do help. We do offer bursting to the cloud for those, you know, maybe seasonal or special case requirements where you have certain needs to just temporary needs to burst to the cloud. But for the most part, you know, we're just offering on-prem solutions. Did that answer your question?
Yep, that's helpful. I have another question. It's about I talked to other professor and here in the conference is that a lot of time the large language model, they require this powerful infrastructure to run, but sometimes some fine-tuned small language model might also get the work done. So how do you think about that in terms of do we really need that powerful GPU to get some tasks done?
Yeah, I mean, you have these, it depends on what the use case is, right? I agree with you, like if you don't, why train a foundation model from scratch or generative large language model from scratch if you can get the task done and using less resources, right? There are times where a general model makes sense, and there's some times where you might just have an LLM attached to a RAG and like that's sufficient for the job. That's kind of how, so it kind of ties to like the infrastructure thing, right? It's like it depends on what your use case is, what your job, what jobs you want to run. Similar to like the model itself, it's like why train and use a lot of compute resources if the task doesn't call for that, right? So depending on what the use case is, we've seen out there in the field where a general model makes the most sense, and we've seen ones where a smaller model makes the most sense. I would just use the right tool for the job, I would say. Yeah.
I have a last question.
Yeah.
And it's about the recent release. You see the DeepSeek like released by the Chinese government but it's kind of powerful and it's trained on really minimum infrastructure. Just curious how you think about it will.
About what was that?
The DeepSeek model.
Oh,
they train on
yeah.
the very minimal GPU resources. So how you think?
Yeah,
about
well, it's
that?
interesting because they did train it on a lot of GPU resources. They did, but I would also say that we love all types of models, right? So when a new model comes out, we have this thing called NIMS, which is NVIDIA Inference Microservices, which allows us or customers to use highly optimized models in containers and deploy them in production. So even when like R1 came out, I was like, this is one's going to be a NIM, right? So instead of using Llama 3, you can use R1 NIM. You could, and we have these types of different things, and it's all about being able to pull models into production and using the right model for the task. So, we, celebrated R1, and we have that into a NIM that customers can take and deploy an infrastructure today, on-prem or the cloud. So that's kind of how we approach like new models that'll come out. We'll just try and make it easier for our customer to deploy it, use it, and then deploy it into production. It's kind of our approach. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's thank Tom and Aaron again.